The position closed at $143, even though I had planned to lose no more than $78. I kept staring at both numbers as if one of them had been entered incorrectly, but the order history was painfully clear. XAUUSD, stop triggered during the candle, filled 26 points beyond the price I had chosen. The chart showed one long red body cutting through my stop like the line had been drawn in pencil. My right hand stayed on the mouse after there was nothing left to click, while my left crushed the grocery receipt I'd brought home that morning. 60.40 for rice, eggs, coffee, detergent, and enough food to make the refrigerator look less abandoned. One candle had cost more than 2 of those receipts. The market had done it in less time than the cashier took to ask whether I wanted a bag. The strange part is that the candle lasted 1 minute, but I can remember individual seconds inside it. I remember the spread widening. I remember the PL jumping from $41 to $89 without passing through the numbers between them. I remember leaning forward as if getting closer to the monitor could slow price down. Then there was that tiny pause before the platform confirmed the loss, a fraction of a second where the screen seemed frozen, and I still believed the stop might save me exactly as designed. It didn't. The order closed, the candle kept falling, and the apartment remained offensively normal. Pipes knocked inside the wall. Someone upstairs dragged a chair across the floor. My coffee sat beside the laptop already cold, because apparently even disaster has to share the room with ordinary noise. That morning had felt harmless. I woke before Fajr and found the kitchen tap coughing air between thin bursts of water. A notice had been pushed under the apartment door during the night. Building maintenance, water shut off from 10 until 2. I filled the kettle, a cooking pot, and 2 bottles before making wudu. The navy prayer mat was still folded neatly in the corner, untouched by everything waiting on the screen. For those few minutes, I wasn't measuring risk or trying to predict where strangers would place their orders. I was just a man in a quiet room, forehead against the mat, while the plumbing complained behind the wall. After prayer, I went to the grocery store before the water stopped and before London opened. I told myself the walk would clear my head, which is something I say whenever my head has already decided not to cooperate. The receipt came out longer than expected. Coffee had gone up again. Detergent, too. I stood near the exit, recalculating the basket like the total might become more reasonable if I understood it better. By the time I returned, the market was 40 minutes from the session I had marked the night before, and the economic calendar showed a high-impact release in red. I saw it. I understood it. Then I placed the receipt beside the laptop, opened the chart, and began looking for reasons why this time the warning probably wouldn't matter. By the time London opened, I had reduced the chart to something that looked almost respectable. Gold had spent the morning pressing beneath 2,347.80, rejecting the same area twice, and I convinced myself the third failure would be enough. The plan was simple. Sell at 2,344.60 after a bearish close, stop at 2,348.50, risk $78, target the lower session range near 2,338.20. I wrote all of it in the journal before touching the order window. The numbers were neat. The logic fit inside 4 lines. Even the position size behaved when I calculated it. That should have made me calmer, but I kept glancing at the red calendar icon in the corner of the screen, then back at the grocery receipt beside my coffee, as though one of them would eventually give me permission. The release was still 19 minutes away when the entry candle closed. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to make hesitation feel cowardly. I watched the wick pull back from resistance, watched sellers press beneath the short-term low, and felt the old urge to reward myself for noticing it before everyone else. My index finger hovered above the mouse, while my other hand flattened the receipt against the desk. I knew the sensible decision was to wait until after the announcement. I also knew the move might happen without me, and apparently missing hypothetical profit felt more threatening than risking actual money. Smart enough to know better. Human enough to do it anyway. I clicked sell. For the first 11 minutes, the trade behaved so well that I began forgiving myself in advance. Price slipped lower, paused, then dropped again. The PL reached $24, then $39, then $50. I leaned back and let one corner of my mouth rise. Not a smile exactly, just that private expression a man makes when reality appears to confirm his intelligence. The stop remained untouched above the structure. The target looked reasonable, and the calendar countdown kept shrinking in the corner. 7 minutes. 5. 3. I could have closed. I could have moved nothing and accepted the original risk. Instead, I told myself the position already had momentum, which was technically true and emotionally useless. With 40 seconds left, I placed my hand around the cold coffee but didn't drink. The spread widened slightly, then slightly more. I noticed it, frowned, and did nothing. The price feed began ticking faster, small movements first, both directions, like a door shaking in its frame before someone kicks it open. My planned stop was still at $2,348.50. The platform showed $31 then, $46, then back to $18 so quickly that the number stopped feeling connected to money. I remember thinking the volatility would settle after the first reaction. I remember thinking my stop was far enough away. I remember thinking many things that lasted less than a second and cost more than they deserved. Then the candle arrived. It opened below my entry, snapped upward through 2,340 an hour, and crossed the remaining distance almost without printing between levels. My shoulders locked. The mug stayed suspended near my chest. Price touched the red stop line, but the order didn't close there. It kept climbing while the platform searched for a fill in a market that had suddenly become thinner than my confidence. The PL flashed. $78, disappeared, returned at $106, and then the candle pushed again. By the time the confirmation appeared, the grocery receipt had folded completely inside my fist. The confirmation window stayed open longer than it needed to, displaying the same number I had already understood but refused to accept. Closed. $143. I read it once, then again, as though repetition might expose a technical error hiding inside the digits. The planned risk had been $78. That was the number I had accepted before the trade, the number written in the journal while my mind was still calm enough to pretend it had authority over my hands. $78 was contained, explainable, something the account could absorb without turning the entire day into an interrogation. But $143 was not the agreement I had made with myself, and my mind immediately began searching for someone else to accuse. The broker, the spread, the news release, thin liquidity, the platform, anything except the man who had seen the red warning on the economic calendar, understood exactly what it meant, and entered anyway. I opened the execution details and studied the timestamps with the desperate concentration of a researcher, trying to disprove his own result. The stop order had triggered where I placed it. The fill came higher. Slippage. Normal during violent movement. I knew that. I had known it for years. I had probably underlined the explanation in some trading book, believing knowledge would become a shield if I collected enough of it. The market had not broken my rule. I had chosen to trade during the exact condition in which the rule could no longer protect me. That distinction made the loss feel worse, because it removed the comfort of being unlucky. I pushed the chair back and stood, but the apartment was too small to offer any meaningful direction. Every attempt to walk away from the desk only created a short circle that eventually returned me to the screen. I went to the kitchen and turned the tap, forgetting for a second about the maintenance notice beneath the door. Nothing came out. The pipe released a hollow hiss, and I stood there holding the handle open as though patience could create water. The sound made me angrier than it should have. No water, cold coffee, a crushed grocery receipt, a red candle still glowing behind me like it had taken ownership of the room. The world had assembled a strangely specific insult and left me alone to appreciate the details. I opened the refrigerator not because I was hungry, but because I needed something to respond when I touched it. Eggs on the second shelf, rice in a plastic container, milk in the door. The groceries I had carried home that morning were sitting there quietly, unaware that they had become part of a trading calculation. 2 weeks of food. That was what $143 meant when it stopped being a number on the platform. It was not account equity or percentage drawdown or statistical variance. It was food, detergent, coffee, and the small ordinary things that kept the apartment functioning while I sat at a desk trying to extract money from movement. When I returned to the screen, gold had already reversed. Of course it had. The candle that stopped me out had left a long upper wick, and the next candle was trading below my original entry, as though the entire spike had been nothing more than a temporary disturbance. I watched the profit that no longer existed calculate itself automatically inside my head. Had the position survived, it would have recovered. A few minutes more and it might have reached the first target. That thought arrived before I could stop it, followed immediately by another. The original idea had been correct. Sellers were returning. The new spike had cleared liquidity above resistance. The market was now doing exactly what I had expected, only without me. My hand moved toward the mouse before I consciously made a decision. I opened the order window and reduced the position size, which made the action feel responsible. I adjusted the stop, which made it feel planned. The chart continued falling while every technical detail rearranged itself into permission. I could re-enter, recover part of the loss, perhaps recover all of it, and end the day with a story about composure instead of stupidity. My index finger rested on the mouse button as I leaned toward the monitor. Everything looked rational again, and that was what frightened me. The most dangerous moment after a loss is not always when anger is loud. Sometimes it comes when anger has cleaned itself up, put on glasses, opened the journal, and found a logical explanation for doing exactly what it wanted from the beginning. I looked down at the receipt beneath my palm. The paper had softened from sweat, its total barely visible through the folds. $67.40. I closed the order window, placed both hands in my lap because I no longer trusted them near the keyboard, and watched the candle continue without me. I watched the next 3 candles fall without touching the mouse. The move reached 2,338.40, almost exactly where I had marked the target the night before, and for a few seconds the platform displayed the proof I had been waiting for. Not proof that the trade was good, but proof that I had been right. That distinction mattered more than it should have. My analysis had worked. The level had held. The direction had been correct. Somewhere inside me, a smaller and more dishonest version of relief started forming. As if being right about direction could cancel being wrong about execution, timing, and risk. It couldn't. The account balance was still $4,617. The loss was still $143. The grocery receipt was still folded under my palm. I had predicted where the market might go, but I had placed myself inside the 1 minute when prediction mattered least. That is the kind of mistake intelligence hates, because there is no missing information to collect afterward. No new indicator. No hidden concept. I had known the release time, understood the slippage risk, and entered anyway. I calculated everything. Except myself. The water returned shortly after noon with a violent cough from the kitchen pipe. Brown air, then a thin stream, then clear water hitting the sink hard enough to splash the wall. I stood there watching it run longer than necessary. The sound filled the apartment, ordinary and steady, and my shoulders finally lowered a little. I washed the coffee mug, rinsed the sweat from my hands, and flattened the grocery receipt on the counter beneath a glass jar. The paper wouldn't lie flat. Every crease remained visible, little white fractures running through the printed total. I made rice and eggs, then ate beside the closed laptop instead of in front of it. My phone kept lighting up with market notifications I had forgotten to disable. Gold down, dollar volatility. Analysts explaining the candle with complete confidence after it had already happened. I turned the phone face down. The food tasted bland, but I finished it. Losing money had not removed the need to eat, and being right about the final direction had not paid for lunch. When the call to prayer came, I made wudu slowly, glasses resting beside the sink, sleeves rolled above my elbows. The water was colder than expected. Good. My head needed something it couldn't negotiate with. The navy prayer mat was still in the corner, exactly where it had been before the chart opened, before the candle, before the number. On it, there was no spread, no slippage, no argument about whether the setup had eventually worked. It was the only place in my day where being right had no value. I stayed seated after prayer until the apartment became quiet again, listening to traffic below and the faint clicking of pipes inside the wall. The loss didn't disappear. I didn't expect it to, but the urgency around it weakened. For the first time since the trade closed, I could see the event as something that had happened, not something still happening. I returned to the desk near sunset and opened the journal, not the platform. At the top of the page, I wrote the facts without adjectives. XAU USD short at 2,344.60. Stop at 2,348.50. Planned risk 78 hours. High impact news in 19 minutes. Actual loss $143. Then I stopped. The remaining space waited for an explanation, and I could feel myself preparing the usual language. Volatility expanded, liquidity disappeared, execution exceeded expectations. All true. None sufficient. So beneath the numbers, I wrote one more line. I saw the warning and decided wanting the trade mattered more. The sentence looked smaller than the loss, but it was heavier. By evening, the chart had become less interesting than the silence around it. I opened the platform once more, not to trade, only to look at the candle after enough time had passed for it to become history. It was smaller now. That was strange. During the trade, it had filled the entire room, stretched across my chest, reached into the kitchen, followed me to the sink. Now it was just one red candle among dozens, one vertical shape inside a larger sequence that had already moved on. The market had absorbed the event completely. No scar, no hesitation. Nothing on the chart suggested that a man had sat 3 feet away from it with his hand frozen around a coffee mug while $143 disappeared. I zoomed out until the candle became almost ordinary, then zoomed in again because part of me wanted the damage to look as large as it had felt. It didn't. Charts are cruel that way. They compress panic into geometry. I shut the platform and took the grocery receipt from beneath the glass jar. The paper was dry now, still wrinkled. The ink faded where my palm had held it too tightly. I folded it once and placed it inside the journal beside the trade notes. Not as a punishment, not as some dramatic reminder to never make the same mistake again. I've written enough rules to know paper can't restrain a man who has already decided to ignore himself. I kept it because numbers become dishonest when they stay on screens too long. $143 looked technical on the order history. On the receipt, it was coffee, rice, eggs, detergent, milk. Twice. It was the weight of 2 grocery bags cutting into my fingers on the walk home. It was something real enough to carry. The apartment lights flickered once after sunset, then steadied. I looked up automatically, thinking about the utility bill even though it had been paid. My body was still searching for consequences. That might be the ugliest part of a bad trade. The money leaves once, but the mind keeps charging interest. I checked the door lock twice. I checked the kitchen tap. I checked the account balance even though I knew the number. 4,617, still alive, still tradable, still dangerously capable of convincing me that nothing serious had happened. Accounts rarely collapse in one grand decision. They erode through survivable mistakes. That's why the mistakes survive too. I heated water and made fresh coffee, then stood beside the window while the city shifted into night. Motorcycles moved below in thin streams of white and red light. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. A delivery rider balanced 2 large bags on the back of his bike, probably carrying someone else's dinner through traffic for an amount smaller than the slippage on my stop. I hated that comparison as soon as it entered my mind, but I didn't push it away. Money doesn't become more meaningful because I lost it trading. It was meaningful before it reached my account, I just forgot. Before bed, I opened the journal one last time. The trade notes looked clinical at the top of the page, then increasingly human as they moved downward. Entry: stop, news time, slippage, receipt, fear, ego. I drew no conclusion. I wrote no new rule. Rules weren't missing today. Obedience was. At the bottom, beneath the folded receipt, I wrote, "One candle changed the number. The decision before it changed what the number meant." Then I closed the journal, placed my glasses on the table, and left the laptop shut. The market would open again tomorrow, The calendar would offer another warning. The chart would draw another shape that looked understandable after it finished. The only thing I still couldn't chart was which version of me would be sitting there when it happened.